All right, today we're jumping right into the high-stakes world of digital security, and you should really think of it like a constant duel. On one side, you've got the fortress builders doing everything they can to create impenetrable walls. And on the other, well, you've got the people who are learning to think exactly like those who want to tear those walls down. So yeah, let's dive straight into this digital battlefield. So how do you outsmart a hacker? I mean, this question pretty much defines our digital age, doesn't it? It's way beyond just having a strong password now. We're talking about real strategy, foresight, and, getting inside your opponent's head. So, how's it actually done?
And look, this isn't some far-off problem just for giant corporations. Think about it. That sketchy email in your inbox, that news report you saw about another massive data leak, we are all on the front lines of this thing. The attacks, they just don't stop, and they're getting smarter all the time.
Okay, so when you're under attack, what's the first thing you do? Well, the most intuitive response is to defend, right? We're talking about building a digital fortress around all your valuable stuff. This is your shield, your armor. Think high walls, moats, the whole shebang, all to protect the castle. And that's what we call defensive security, or DefSec for short. It's kind of the traditional approach, You find your weak spots, you patch them up, you set up a bunch of alarms to go off if anyone tries to sneak in. It's all about being reactive. Basically, you're getting ready for an attack that you know sooner or later is going to come. So, these defenders, they have a whole arsenal of tools to build up these layers of protection. First up, you've got firewalls. They're basically the gatekeepers for all your network traffic. Then, of course, there's antivirus software, which is always on the hunt for any known bad guys. You've also got these things called intrusion detection and prevention systems. Just think of them as your digital security guards on patrol. And finally, encryption. This just scrambles all your data so it looks like complete gibberish to anyone who doesn't have the secret key. Every single one of these is just another thick layer on that fortress. But here's the thing. What if just building bigger and bigger walls isn't enough, right? That's where the other side of this whole coin comes into play. You've heard the saying, the best defense is a good offense. Well, in cybersecurity, that means you've got to learn to think and even act, just like a hacker. And this is what we call offensive security, or OffSec. It's a totally proactive, almost adversarial way of thinking. Instead of just sitting around and waiting for an attack, you launch simulated attacks against yourself. Why? Because the goal is to find all the cracks in your own fortress before the real enemy does. It's a really simple idea, but man, it's powerful. Find your own weaknesses before someone else does.
Now, what you're seeing here really breaks down the different jobs, and it's super interesting. On the offensive side, you've got folks doing stuff like penetration testing and vulnerability scanning. They're actively poking and prodding, looking for holes. But then, on the defensive side, the focus is totally different. It's all about security management, building and maintaining the walls, making sure everything is locked down. They are two completely different mindsets for sure. But as we're about to see, they're also deeply, deeply connected. So, what does one of these offensive operations actually look like in practice? Well, a classic example is something called a penetration test, or a pen test for short. And it basically follows the exact same playbook a real attacker would use. First, they do reconnaissance. That's just fancy for gathering intel on the target. Then they start scanning, trying to find any open doors or windows, any potential entry points. Next comes the fun part. Exploitation. This is where they actually try to break in. And finally, if they get in, it's post-exploitation. They see what they can access, what they can control, and, this is the most important part, they report everything back so those holes can be plugged for good.
Okay, so to really get why you need both of these strategies, let's take a look at a couple of the actual weapons being used in this digital war. I mean, these are the real-world threats that the offensive and defensive teams are battling every single day. All right, first up, the infamous DDoS attack. So what you're seeing here is how it works. An attacker gets control of a whole network of hijacked computers. That's called a botnet, and uses them to just flood a target server with a ridiculous amount of traffic. Imagine 1,000 cars trying to get into a one-lane driveway all at once. The server gets so overwhelmed with all these junk requests that it just can't keep up, and it can't respond to actual legitimate users. It basically grinds to a halt. And then you've got something like a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, this one is way sneakier. An attacker finds a way to secretly wedge themselves right between you and whatever service you're talking to, say your bank. From that position, they can intercept everything. They can read your messages, they can even change them, and neither you nor the bank would have any idea. It's the perfect digital equivalent of someone opening your mail, reading it, and then sealing it back up like nothing ever happened.
Pretty creepy. Okay, so we've got the fortress builders on one side and the ethical attackers on the other, defense and offense. So which one's better? Well, it turns out that's the wrong question. The real winning strategy isn't about choosing a side at all. It's about getting them to work together.
And in the world of cybersecurity, this actually gets formalized into what they call red teams and blue teams. The red team is your offensive squad. They're the designated attackers. Their whole job is to simulate real-world threats and test the company's defenses. So for example, they might cook up a really convincing phishing email and send it out to see who clicks. And then you have the blue team. They're the defenders. They're the ones watching the network, managing all the security tools, and trying to spot and shut down the red team's attack as it's happening in real time.
But the real magic, the breakthrough moment, is when these two teams stop just fighting each other and actually start collaborating. And this creates what's known as a purple team. Get it? Red and blue together make purple. It's not really a separate group of people, it's more of a mindset. The red team shares exactly how they're attacking, and they share it with the blue team right away. This lets the defenders immediately tune their tools and fix their strategies on the fly. It is the ultimate feedback loop, and it makes the entire defense so much stronger.
And really, that's the main takeaway here. It's not about offense versus defense. A truly robust security strategy doesn't pick a side. It weaves them both together, creating this constant cycle of testing, defending, and getting better. That's what makes the whole system tougher. Which, of course, leaves us with a pretty mind-bending question for the future. We're seeing attackers and defenders start to use AI. So where does that lead? Do we eventually get to perfectly secure, unhackable systems, or does this timeless game of cat and mouse just get faster, like way faster, accelerating to machine speed? It's a huge question, and the answer is probably going to define the next chapter of cybersecurity.